Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Welcome to the 8th Engage Your Fanbase podcast. I'm Kharmah. I do publicity at Simon Says Booking in Western Massachusetts. And you can find me at engageyourfanbase.com, where our goal of the blog is to demystify music marketing for the average musician. And we can also find me at Live Music News and Review. I Periscope every weekend at the handle at LMN&R. And today I have Solveig Whittle. Why don't you start by introducing yourself and what you do, and then we'll go into it, because I'm excited to talk about it, obviously.
Hi, everybody out in Blab World. I'm Solveig, and I'm a musician, and I am a marketing person. I used to work at a big company out here in the Northwest, and I did software marketing, and now I do music, I do blogging, I consult with other musicians, and I teach social media at the University of Washington part-time. So I do lots of different things, and I really enjoy talking to other musicians, interviewing other musicians, figuring things out, doing things on my own, and writing about that so that other people can learn.
Well, you're definitely a good writer, and your blog name is shadesofsolveig.com, right?
Exactly. Just like my Twitter handle. You can also get to me at Solveig Whittle, SOLVEIGWHITTLE.com. That's my name. And you can find me, same website there.
All right. So we've been talking a little bit. I tracked you down on social media, but because I've seen you all over the place on Twitter and on Facebook groups, and you're very active. And then I read one of your latest blog posts, which was called Popcorn with Mark Mulligan and Indie Marketing Tactics. And It was a fabulous blog post. I highly recommend. Actually, I'm going to put the post URL in the comments here. Yep.
And can I ask you one question? Do I say your name Kara or Kara?
Kara.
Kara. Okay.
Kharmah.
Kara.
I get Kara all the time, but that's okay. So this had a lot of really great points, but the first part I think that we need to talk about is for those who haven't read the blog post, explaining what this popcorn business is all about.
Yeah. So probably a lot of people who are on here have read it, but for those of you who have not, the basic idea I just completely stole from a gentleman named Mark Mulligan. He's an music industry analyst, and if you haven't read his blog, I highly recommend it. It's Mark Mulligan. You can Google him and find him really easily. He writes a lot of stuff about streaming in particular, and so I follow his blog. But this particular post that I wrote was about his idea that he had promoted, I think it was earlier in the spring, that musicians really are having a hard time figuring out how to make money on their music. It's real easy to make music these days. And so there's just this proliferation of, reasonably good music, well-produced, recorded, because it's gotten so much cheaper to make music and also to distribute it. For those of us who use CD Baby or TuneCore, it's, $59, $99. It's super cheap to get your stuff out there digitally. And the result is that there's so much music that the value of the music itself has really been diminished just through the law of supply and demand. So much music out there. And the analogy that he drew was with the movie industry. That in the beginning of the movie industry in the early 20th century, it was music theaters, cinemas actually found it very difficult to make money because they couldn't charge enough to support the cost of them projecting the music. So they discovered that if they sold popcorn, which was a very cheap thing to produce, but they could sell it because they had a captive market, they could actually use that very high margin product to make money back that they couldn't make on the ticket sales. And they had tried all these other things as well. And so he used that analogy. And in the same post, he also uses the analogy of the gold rush, where a lot of people didn't really make a lot of money actually finding gold, even though because there were all these people out there looking for it. The people who really made their fortunes in the gold industry, in the gold rush time period, were the people who sold shovels and equipped the miners. So they kind of latched onto this idea of, making money off the people who were trying very hard to compete with each other to make money. And, some of them made money, but a lot of them didn't. And so he's kind of likening in some ways the music industry to the gold rush. We just had tons and tons and tons of people striving very hard, and a few who make it at the top, but the vast majority of people who really don't. And so what he's trying to say is, you really need to find something as a musician that you can make money off of. And the idea that you have this captive market, if you have an actual performance, or you have like a live streaming performance, you can sell things to your fans and make money from your fans. You just probably are not going to make it from downloading your music and selling the music itself. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the basic idea, premise of his talk and his article.
Yeah, so it's essentially, that you're having the movies as an excuse to sell popcorn, to make money on popcorn. And that's a really hard thing for a musician to think about, in terms of, like, you have the music, so you have an excuse to sell merch. Really.
Well, and I don't think about it as an excuse. I think about it as an auxiliary product. Like, musicians have needed to be patronized, basically, supported by patrons for the whole history of music. I mean, when we started with troubadours, who were wandering troubadours, they were wandering around to different, kingdoms or castles or households, and playing for their living, really. And those people were valuing them as entertainers, and they were not really selling like recorded music. They were selling the entertainment experience, and the key was that it was limited. Like, the troubadour would only come every 6 months or whatever. And maybe there were multiple troubadours, but you would only hear that particular troubadour's songs that he knew. And we've always had a history of, patronage by kings and queens of musicians and the arts. Our most famous composers in Europe were had patrons who funded them. And I think, in some sense, if you think about this idea of an auxiliary product as a way for people to become your patrons, like, they know that they might be paying $7 for a box of popcorn, right? At the movies, that. You don't think about it as, oh, I'm supporting the movie theater, and isn't that great? But I think musicians can use that economic model and say, hey, I can sell you something that is meaningful to you as a fan, even though you're going to pay extra money for it, because you're going to pay that because you're going to know that you're supporting me as an artist. So I don't think of it necessarily as you're trying to sell the popcorn. I think about it as you're trying to offer your fans a way to support you by getting something of value, but also them knowing that they are actually paying a little bit extra in order to be able to support you in your career.
The reason I said that, no, I don't think that it's, an excuse to sell merch, but I do think that it's important for bands to take those auxiliary products seriously, and a lot of bands don't. A lot of it's an afterthought. It's like, oh, we have a band and we want to play music, and bands are so focused on selling their music. And we'll talk about the freemium model later, but it's really important to realize, to understand where your revenue streams are going to come from in the day and age.
Exactly. And what the margins are. And I think I totally agree with you. And that's one of the things that I covered in that blog post, which is that I feel like a lot of the crowdfunding campaigns that I've participated in as a patron, musicians really struggle with how to structure the premiums that they give away. And I'm always looking for, good examples of that, because There's plenty of bad examples out there. I don't know what the percentage is offhand. Maybe Tyler knows, but the huge percentage of Kickstarter campaigns, don't reach their full asking dollar price. And that's probably true on Pledge Music as well. And most of the campaigns, the average, I think a couple of years ago on Kickstarter was like $7,000 or $8,000. And musicians certainly usually ask for a lot more than that. And they need a lot more than that, but they're not really, I think a lot of musicians, we hear about the Amanda Palmers, but we don't hear about the average musician, asking for $7,000 and getting $3,000. And I think, I don't think anyone's done a really good job of sort of breaking down why those premiums are not attractive, or, alternately why some premium and some campaigns are really super attractive to fans. Because, there are those campaigns where people just, blow past their goals, but they're few and far between.
And I think that you talk a lot in your blog, not your podcast, about selling the experience, and it's about selling the experience, but even more so, one of the examples you gave was a band, I can't remember the name of the band, who was one of the premiums that they got for their Kickstarter or their crowdfunding campaign was that they would make bad meals, essentially, not meals, but they weren't even really great cooks. But I think the thing that is missing there, the thing that is really key is like, what are fans valuing? And what they're valuing is the connection with the artist. And that's why the experience is something, and it can be experiential without it being a live broadcast, or it can be experiential without it being a dinner with the musician. It could be experiential, just having a reminder of that experience, like a poster that's signed or something like that. But it's really that connection.
Exactly. An example that I didn't have in my blog post because I experienced it since then was a concert window concert that I participated in as a fan from the US, where the concert was actually being given in Sweden by two musicians, both of whom live in America. One is of Swedish descent. One is a little bit more removed of Swedish descent, but they were doing a concert in a small, I think it was kind of like a basement club. There were people there, but it was a small venue in Sweden. And one of the premiums, if you're not aware of Concert Window, they do have a premium or a tipping process where you can tip the performers and receive a premium. So it's similar in some ways to Pledge Music or Kickstarter. And
like kind of virtual passing the hat.
Yeah, it's kind of passing the hat, but there's something that you get in exchange. So a lot of musicians will do things like offer a digital download, or they'll offer, in this case, these two musicians offered to send a postcard from Sweden. And the tipping price for that postcard from Sweden was $10. And here was what I thought was brilliant about this. I got an email after the concert. So first of all, Concert Window allows you to collect the emails of those who tip. So you're getting an email for that fan. Number two, I know that postcard didn't cost $10 for them to buy and send from Sweden. It probably cost a few bucks because it's not cheap, but still, they made significant margin on that. And that's really what Mark Mulligan's post is really all about, is the margin. But number three, what I thought was really brilliant was I got this email and I could see, because they did not CC everybody. So unfortunately, but I could see how many people had tipped them $10. And there was 10 or 15 people who had tipped them $10. So they were doing this concert anyway. They made probably about 150 extra bucks. Well, minus the postcard. So maybe they made 100 extra bucks just on this one premium tip idea. They had other ones, and people were tipping them like $2-3 just for nothing. You can also do that on Concert Window, is just tip for no reason, just because you're tipping, literally. But what I loved was this whole idea. People obviously responded to that idea of getting a postcard from Sweden from these two young women who were playing and performing. And it was, again, I think like you're saying, it was that personal connection. It was that idea of, I'm experiencing this through, the online streaming, but I'm also getting a personalized piece of, memorabilia, essentially a memento from this, from these people that they are directly signing. And it had that personal touch. And I think a lot of artists try to do that on Kickstarter or on crowdfunding campaigns, but they kind of miss the mark a little bit. And sometimes it's, the same thing could work for one artist that doesn't work for another. So you kind of have to know your fans, I think. But in this case, it worked really, really well. And I think part of it was the idea of getting something exotic from another exotic location. So what a cool thing, brilliant that maybe they planned it, that they stumbled on it, and it obviously struck a chord with the viewing audience outside of Sweden.
I think that's brilliant, and like you said, I think it has a lot to do with the connection that they're getting.
Absolutely.
People get a connection with the band when they buy a T-shirt and it has the tour dates on it, and they can say, "I went to that Chicago show." It's. I mean, we crave connection in this world, and musicians are uniquely positioned to touch you in a different way than most products. I mean, I talk about it in that term, but it is a product in some ways. It's an art in another way. But being able to facilitate that in different ways, like the postcard, is really powerful. That's a great example.
Yeah, and I have another example. I recently attended the live. So I am a little bit of a geek, and I took my son to see the Mythbusters, Adam and Jamie, who are touring live. They've been touring since the spring. Now, here's an example of a non-live recorded show that is going live, and they sold out most of their shows. They've been touring for months. Their merchandise table was packed. I mean, before the show, intermission, and after the show, the line was like, you had to wait 15 or 20 minutes in line to buy their merchandise. They didn't have a lot of things that they offered. They offered a signed poster that was literally signed by both of them, small version and a large version. I think they had 2 different T-shirts, one of which had the tour dates on it, which I agree with you. I think the tour date idea, I mean, if you're touring and you have like multiple tour dates, T-shirt with 2 tour dates is probably maybe not going to work as well. But location specific, I think, is really cool. And this idea of integrating, what I liked here was the idea of integrating the live experience with the non-live experience, and how that reaches, in their case, they built their audience through television, and then they went live. Most musicians, it's the other way around. They're building this live audience and live fan base, and then they may be going into a non-live medium like, a YouTube kind of environment where they're posting or podcasting or, doing a blab or doing Periscope. It's live, but it's not in person. And that integration of the live experience and the non-live, I think, is one of the really most interesting things that I think creative artists can do today, because doing something live is very demanding. Even doing a concert window on a regular basis and signing up to do that is a fairly, demanding thing to do. And certainly doing YouTube, where, we hear about these YouTube stars, but those guys work their butts off, creating content every week. You have to have a team to create content. And most indie artists really, I just don't think are going to do that. And even doing like a Kickstarter campaign, that's a lot of work. It's a huge amount of work. So I think you want to really think about what you can do that is, keeping in mind the margins, the high margin idea, which is really Mark Mulligan's, the core of his post. But also really thinking about what is easy for you to do, because you need to be consistent about it. You need to be reaching out to your community on a regular basis, not just doing a one-time thing and then disappearing, but reaching out to your community and creating this group around you of fans who look forward to tuning in, whether it's live or, you know, virtually live, and building that and creating that value. You know, that's what we kind of, in the corporate world, in marketing, we always called that, there's this idea of goodwill, that you can actually monetize, you can have a monetary value for your brand. So like when you buy an Oreo cookie, you can ask for more money because it's branded as an Oreo than the generic, you know, store-bought version. And I think musicians really need to think about what it is that they can bring to the table in addition to their music, that they can create that margin where they're really creating that goodwill, whether it's because they're entertaining, you know, super entertaining, or whether it's because they have a cause that their fans really resonate with, something unique about themselves that they can sell that differentiates themselves and allows their fans to feel good about paying a little bit extra for, you know, for supporting them, basically, for patronizing them, because they might be getting something of value, but the idea is they're going to be paying quite a bit more in the margin than what the thing is worth, you know, just straight up. You're not talking about commoditizing. You want to get away from something that can be commoditized and towards something that has a unique value for you, the artist, for your fans, because of you as the artist.
Well, it's not the bracelet or the T-shirt, or, you know, we're talking about, you know, merch specifically here, but it is that, and it doesn't even need to be, I mean, the quality needs to be there, but it doesn't even need to be, you know, a premium product as much as it needs to be something that's unique and something that is just going to connect on you. You know, a lot of it has to do with really understanding your target audience, and I've got a lot of musicians who really don't do that. They don't understand. You say, who's your target? You know, who comes to your shows? And like, who would like your music? You're like, well, anybody who likes music, you know. And it's really understanding, you know, it's basic branding and marketing. Understanding who you're talking to and who your audience is the first step towards creating any kind of product. Now with musicians, the product is music, and it's not necessarily going to be, the music itself isn't necessarily going to be tailored to the target audience, because you're producing an art. But but it's understanding your target audience to produce that experience and whatever they're looking for
around the music. Exactly, the experience around the music. And that was the key idea also in Mark's post, was what you're selling is the experience. And I think you have a really good point that the experience doesn't necessarily have to be a live experience. You know, the experience can mean a personalized piece of merchandise, something that reminds, you know, the band you mentioned earlier who did the dinner idea, that's the Ari Moore band, and they're here in Seattle. And it's Ari and her fiance, who is the drummer, are the kind of core of the band. And one of the items they offered in addition to the dinner for $222, which she made a point to say was going to probably come out of a can, and people still bought it. But one of the other items were these hats that Eddie, her fiance, had, the drummer, and he had collected these hats over the years, and he was kind of famous for wearing different hats at different shows. And so those hats, they auctioned those hats off also as part of their Kickstarter campaign. And she mentions in the blog post that those were some of the items that were most coveted, and they probably could have asked for more money for those because they ran out so quickly and people really liked them. And so, you know, the point was, it was that personal connection. It was the idea that even though these are not people who, you know, are famous by any means, you know, they have their following here in Seattle, but they're not like a nationally known band, but they do have really loyal fans, and those fans were willing to pay far above and beyond the value of that particular hat because it had been worn by the drummer and because it meant something to the band and because it meant something to the fan. And I think that's really the key. It was personal.
Well, it's also it's personal, but it's this combination of that experiential and the other point that you've been making in the blog post, which was scarcity, supply and demand. I mean, not only was it personal, and not only did it speak directly to this connection with the audience that he had, but there was only 12 of them,
Right.
So it's combine the two, supply and demand, and the experience, and you're going to find an avenue to create more revenue and a higher margin than you would have just the regular white t-shirt.
Yeah, and I think that's a place where a lot of times bands could do with talking to somebody like on the chat today, we've got Tyler, we have Don Harrison, we have Simon, you and I, a lot of us we help bands. That's one of the things that we try to do is consult with bands. And I think a lot of times bands don't view hiring somebody to consult with them around a Kickstarter campaign as something of value. And I will say that even as an artist myself, it is so much more valuable to spend a couple of $100 having an outsider look at what you do than trying to do it yourself, because you're sometimes too close to it. And an outsider can look at it, especially somebody who has some experience in the industry and has worked with other bands, because you don't always have that perspective. But more importantly, I think you don't have the perspective looking back at yourself. It's just impossible to have that. And somebody can look at what you have to offer as an individual, as a band, and say, why don't you offer this premium? Hey, you guys are good at this, or you have some skills in the band in this area that you haven't really exploited to create some things that aren't going to be very expensive for you to create, but you can offer for a higher margin for your Kickstarter campaign or at your shows. And I think, there's so many people out there who want to sell things to indie musicians and teach them, how to do this or do that or do whatever. But I think some well-placed dollars of consulting prior to a crowdfunding campaign can make the difference, or a CD release party, or when you're going out on a tour and you're trying to figure out what your merchandise should be, or when you're redoing your website and you're trying to figure out what merchandise you should be offering. Yep. I think some well-placed dollars there. Most musicians don't really consider this idea of hiring somebody to do that. And it doesn't have to be really expensive. You're not talking about a multi-$1,000 PR campaign. You're talking about, a few hours with somebody who has a fresh set of eyes, who can come in and say, look, this message is really appealing to your fans because I see all this traffic and discussion around this issue or this offering or this angle. So why don't you elaborate on that? Why don't you just do more of what's working? Sometimes as a band, you can't even tell really what's working. You're so immersed in the day-to-day that you don't have that outside perspective. Yeah. And if you could just have another set of eyes look at your stuff completely fresh, a lot of times people can identify things that are really going to work better for you than what you thought was going to work really well for you.
I think that's true of any business or musician. Just today we have this website, livemusicnewsandreview.com, and it's a music magazine online, covering live music, obviously, and we have a mailing list, of course. And I was looking on the website, and I realized we didn't have a contact form. I consult with people to build their mailing lists, right? And it's just one of the many websites we have. But where was you miss that when you're too
Yes.
close. And the other piece of it, besides being too close and hiring people, and this is kind of off the topic, but I think it's important, is bands are just like you said, so busy. It's just I used to do marketing consulting for small businesses, and it was very similar because you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to know a little about a lot of things, or a lot about a lot of things, and you have to do it all in a very condensed period.
When
of
you'd
time.
really rather be making music,
you're not going to get as much.
Whatever your small business is.
When you'd rather
making pies or walking dogs or doing consulting work or doing engineering drawings, you'd really rather be doing that. But the reality is you do have to put some thought into that. And why not, find somebody with some experience, obviously somebody who's qualified, somebody who's got some good ideas, somebody who a friend can recommend. It's just like anytime finding a dentist or a doctor or anything, find somebody else has had good experience with, and pay them a few shekels, to help you reframe what you're doing. Because if you're going to spend the time on buying merch, the energy, the time to define, and the money, which is a huge investment up front for most musicians to buy. I mentioned that in my article, to buy a box of 500 t-shirts is not cheap. And, if you're buying premium items, like some of the things that sell really well, like the, hoodies, those things, cost $20, $25, not to mention the silk screening and all that. So, let somebody help you do a little brainstorming and do a little definition of what your market really looks like, and what's already working for you, and what kind of talents and unique things you can bring to the table. Thanks for all the applause. What kinds of unique things can you bring to the table that are going to be valuable to your fans? Not just what you have on hand, or what you think will work, or even with the band down the street, what worked for them.
Well, and it also just comes down to value and benefits to the customer. It's not to the fan. A lot of people, when you're in just business in general, people sell the product instead of the benefits of it. And what are the benefits to that fan of getting that t-shirt? What do they get out of it? And they value those benefits, and that's what they're buying. And it's that, again, I get back to that connection and that experience that they got to involve themselves in. So,
can I just say one more thing? The 4 boys I took with me to see Adam and Jamie all bought t-shirts. So only one of them brought money with him to buy the t-shirts, and the other one was my son, so I bought him a t-shirt. And the other 2 begged me, as soon as they saw the other 2 boys had t-shirts, they begged me to lend them monies, and of course their moms would pay me back, to buy them t-shirts. And the reason was because they wanted to go to school the next day and wear their Adam and Jamie t-shirts, because they wanted to talk about how they had been at this experience. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, it was really a fun thing. I enjoyed it, and they loved it. And they were talking about, they were like chattering all the way home in the car, it was really cute. And they all 4 of them wore their t-shirts the next day. And I think that idea of a memento is very powerful. And if you can figure out something that somebody can not only, t-shirts are the big thing, but some way for a fan to publicly acknowledge their fandom, provided they had a positive experience, and we're assuming that they are, because that's why they're paying. Fans want to declare their public support for you. They want to evangelize, because that makes them look like people that are in the know, who have discovered an artist before other people have discovered them. It brings value to their community they are trendsetters. And I think that's another really important point is, if you can provide them an opportunity to do that, that's a win-win for everybody.
I think they want to be asked about that. I think they want to be asked about that. And the great part about that is not only are they giving you for that T-shirt, the money for that T-shirt, and you're being able to support yourself. They are
free advertising for you.
That's right. It's not even free. It's not even free.
They pay you. I know. T-shirts are amazing.
So. Finding a creative way to get people to ask you about what is that, what was that you did. It also I evangelize about connection with fans, but it makes them feel like they're on their team. It's like I'm on team band X, and that's a closer connection with that band that they admire.
Go ahead.
I want to. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there was an earlier comment I think Tyler made about a lot of bands not building their fan base before they do their crowdfunding, and I think that was the thing that Ari did a great job of. Ari had been very active on Facebook, in particular, not on Twitter but on Facebook. She had nurtured her fans, and so that's why she did incredibly well in her Kickstarter and raised over, way over her goal. She went on, I think she raised about $18,000, which is much higher than the average Kickstarter. And this was a couple of years ago even. And I think that's really key, is that nurturing prior. You can't just like cold start this kind of thing. You do need to nurture those fans and have that community and engage with them ahead of time. And now you have this connection, and now it's personal for your fans and they want to help you.
Yeah. So I want to just go back to the blog post. Go back to the blog post real quick, because I thought you provided some really good tips. You kind of broke it down. And if anybody who's watching and has not read the blog post again that we were speaking about, here's the.
Thank you. I'm turning my pages. I'm licking my fingers. I can turn the pages and have it here for reference.
You gave, I think, 5 tips. One of them you started with, and we don't have that much time, so we can't go too deep into them, but was the freemium. And that is something I really believe in. We have, at Simon Says, we have an artist, Adam Ezra, and Adam Ezra group, and every time he has a show, he says, we have CDs up there, and I'm great. Half the musicians don't even bother to say they have a merch table, so one half the battle. And then the second, thing he says is, give what you can, and if you can't give anything, take it for free. Now, 2 things. Number one, not that it's about guilt, but I feel, you want to support the artist, and I bet you hardly anybody just goes and takes a CD. And number 2 is, I really think that, artists, again, like I was saying, are so close-fisted about their music, that when you give somebody a freemium, and that the freemium works, when you're doing marketing websites or, anything like that, this is a freemium that gives people trial, and they take you home with them. And so it's not just the T-shirt, but they're taking you, and then if they listen to it, they're more likely to come back, which is, we haven't talked about the other place that you make the majority of your money, which is gigging. And you're just building that ability to gig, and then you have the ability when you gig again to market, a T-shirt to them the next time. So I think the freemium that you bring up is really critical, and so anyway, now that I've talked about
embracing freemium is, not a unique idea that, I came up with. This is towards the end of the article where I talk about applying lessons from the PC video game industry to music. Yeah. And I think, in general, this is the direction that marketing is moving in, which is to sort of segment your offerings as well as your audience. And so not just based on your audience's ability to pay, but also based on what you can give away that will in some sense provide a value, but also the idea is you're seeding the music to people. One of the things that I learned from a gentleman who was selling his books was he carried copies of his self-published book everywhere he went. And he would give them away. He basically allocated, I think it was like 10% of his print run as giveaways. And that was like a conscious decision that he made. And he made enough money back that he could do that. He would sell other copies at a high enough margin that he could do that. So he was very conscious of what the margins were. But the reason that he did that was he would only do it with people who he felt who were going to read the book and who were going to comment on the book, or he would get something out of it, an influencer. And I have done the same thing really essentially at some live shows where if someone comes up to me after the show, I have my merch table, but if someone comes up to me after the show and just is going on and on about how they love my music, I'll give them a free CD. Even if they, whether or not they've bought one, I'll give them another one because, and that was part of what this guy said too was, try to do a 2-for-1 because what you want is for them to give that away to somebody else. You want the music to travel beyond that one person. You want to give that person a way to easily evangelize your music to somebody else. And it's totally worth a couple of bucks that you paid to produce that CD to give it away to somebody else who's going to give it to somebody else as a gift or give it to somebody else. You never know. That person could be, they could have a sister or brother who's in radio. Or they could, and if they really liked you, again, they want to evangelize your music because they want to seem like they're in the know. They want to seem like they're the ones who have discovered you. So give them the opportunity to do that.
So I had a million other questions, but we've almost talked for an hour. So I don't know if you're interested, but I would love to continue this conversation some other time. I wanted to open it up for Tyler to jump in. He had talked about doing that earlier, and I wanted to see if he had anything to add to the conversation. And I wanted to finish with, maybe what some of your predictions with the end of 2015. Talk about that a little bit, and then we'll close up. So Tyler, if you were interested, why don't you let us know? And great.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Hi.
Hey.
Cool. Yeah, I'm in a coffee shop, so I don't want to completely evangelize my music industry insight. But no, everything you guys have been talking about has been spot on. And thanks for touching on what I said earlier about before you crowdfund anything, you need a crowd. I think one thing artists are guilty of, and my background's in both major labels and indie labels. I actually began my career with Sony Music before working at an ad agency and then taking my own independent work full time. And this is across the spectrum. Artists want everything at once. They want to write the music. They want the world tour. They want the manager for some reason. They want a record deal and they want the crowd. But it's building blocks. Before you get a manager, you need something to manage. Before you crowdfund something, you need a crowd. So this conversation is great because we're already assuming you have a fan base, but it's just so important to make sure that you're getting interaction online. You're getting mentions from your fans. You're getting all sorts of interaction before you decide to launch any kind of campaign. But no, everything's really been great. I agree, and things like Patreon, things like crowdfunding can really be helpful if you're ready for it.
Yeah. And Tyler, I think one of the things that sometimes businesses do better than musicians is musicians are always kind of like, well, how do I get fans? Like I should have fans. Like my music is amazing and I should get fans. Like they should just be flocking to me. But you know what? Businesses and startups in the tech world understand completely that you need to build that fan base by starting small. Everybody starts somewhere. What you need to do is find those, let's say, every musician should have 1 or 2 rabid fans So if you engage with those rabid fans in a public forum like social media, you now are creating that perception of value right there, just from one or two fans. And you can do that. You can absolutely do that. That's what, that's what P.T. Barnum did, right? He didn't start with like huge crowds coming to his circus. He started out by nurturing those one or two or handful of folks who really were enthusiastic about his music and being public about interacting with those people. And then other people were like, hey, what is that?
Right.
And he built it. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of musicians really get stuck on, which is, it isn't just going to appear. Your mailing list isn't just going to grow to 2,000 overnight. Right. You really do need to start with that one relationship at a time and love your fans. Love your fans who love you, and they will spread the love. And it will happen, but it does not happen overnight. And it doesn't always happen because of your music. Your music is so great that 10,000 people are going to immediately like it. And it wasn't true for Rihanna. It wasn't true for Justin Bieber. All those people those careers were built through nurturing those fans a few at a time, and then those few, and it multiplied.
Exactly. And
I like this comment here. Build it and they will come. I think not, but build a relationship and they will flock to you. And again, it gets back to that connection, and really engaging with your fan base.
Harrison. If you don't know him, Carl, you should make friends with Don.
I know.
Tyler knows him.
Yeah, and not just in a relationship setting. I mean, even in a technical setting, if you look how social media works, if you look how all social media is built around sharing, retweeting, because if your stuff's not shared, no one else is going to see it. So you can have a great track on SoundCloud, but if nobody's sharing it anywhere, it's just going to sit there. So yeah, from a business standpoint and from a technical standpoint, you have to make stuff that's engaging that people are going to talk about. And another thing companies do that bands don't want to look into is branding in general. You were talking about Rihanna and Justin Bieber, but I mean, a Rolex isn't that great of a watch, but the name brand and the logo makes it what it is. And that's what it is. It's building a brand. It's building something that people are going to want. If you have great merch, people are going to want to be a part of that and want to get the merch. So it's about the movement. It's about branding. And that's pretty true across the board.
And I will say one of those other very important parts of branding that I know we don't have time to go into this, but what you name your band does kind of matter, because your Twitter handle needs to be spellable. Your website people need to be able to remember how to spell that. I just was talking to an artist yesterday who the old band name was essentially a Navajo, I think, name.
Wow.
And it was kind of a little bit hard to understand. And he's not Navajo. And so he actually consulted, I think it was Navajo, but he consulted with the tribe and they were like, no, you can't use our name for your band. Right. Of course not. And, he liked the name because he thought it was really cool. But honestly, the name he's using right now is much better for his demographic because it's just his first and last name. Right. And it's actually fairly easy. It's not so generic that you can't find him. There may be some other guys with his name, but still not in our town. And, it's spellable. You can remember it. It's relatable. It sounds kind of cool, but it's not like impossible. It just rolls off the tongue a lot better than this like Indian name or Native American name that was like too pretentious, frankly. I mean, he wasn't doing Native American music and he was not Native American. So, your brand needs to be the words you use in your brand. You do need to kind of think a little bit about that because you do want to choose things that people can, Justin Bieber and Rihanna uses just her first name. I mean, look at Sia. That's about as short as you can get, right? And it's easy to remember. It's easy to spell. It's fairly unique. Put some thought into that because if you're going to put a lot of energy into building that brand, you want that brand to be something that people will be able to spell and say.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to start pulling this to a close because it's almost it's 2 o'clock already. Tyler, thanks so much for jumping on. Maybe we can meet up on social media again and exchange some ideas and maybe talk again on Blab. That would be really cool.
All right, thanks, guys.
Really great. Thanks for jumping on. Solveig, would you be interested in doing this again and finishing up our conversation? Because to kind of preview that, you've had 5 tips. We talked about premium, but there's quite a few other things. Also, I found the comments on the blog post really interesting, and I'd like to talk about some of the points that they brought up. So we will continue this conversation after the holidays.
And we can even talk about what thoughts on 2016 then too, because it'll be early 2016.
You're right. That's a great idea.
Leave them
so I think we're going to pull this to a close. We are leaving them. I'm sure we are. You're leaving me wanting more because I have so much other things that I'd like to discuss with you. But for now, I think we're gonna close up today. So thank you so much, everybody.
And can you tell us where we can find the recording later?
Yes. So here, you know what? Let me pull that up.
And in the meanwhile, I'll just talk about. You can find me on Twitter at Shades of Solveig, SOLVEIG. It's all one word, Shades of Solveig, no underscore. That's also the name of my blog, and my last name is Whittle. You can just Google me and find me everywhere. Solveig, SOLVEIG, Whittle, WHITTLE.
And you can find this. This is the Engage Your Fanbase podcast. It's on iTunes now, so it'll take another week to get this one up. And I just put up the blog post where the video of this will be, and information on Solveig as well.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic.
Oh, I'm echoing on my end. Anyway, I'm Kharmah. You can follow me on Blab and Twitter at Kharmah. That's KARAKHARMEH, 2 extra H's. And I'm with Simon Says Booking and EngageYourFanbase.com and LiveMusicNewsReview.com. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you jump in again when we have Solveig back, because it'll certainly be a great conversation again. So thanks so much. I think we'll be on next Wednesday. I'm not sure when Solveig will be back, but usually I'm having the Blab on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Eastern. But next week's New Year's Eve, and this was Christmas Eve, and so I think we're probably going to change the time and date. Anyway, thanks a lot, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for the opportunity.